Tonight, some protesters have smashed windows and started fires. And online, self-styled Antifa groups are calling for more, quote, direct action. Martin Costi, NPR News, Seattle.
A giant of the civil rights movement who championed equality by nonviolent means is being remembered. Democratic Congressman John Lewis died a week ago from pancreatic cancer at the age of 80. Next week, he will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. He will be laid to rest in Georgia, the state he represented in Congress until his death. But first, this weekend, John Lewis returns to where he was born, as Troy Public Radio's Kyle Gassett reports.
On Saturday, the public will have two opportunities to participate in public viewings of the late congressman. One in Troy, Alabama, close to where Lewis grew up on a farm, famously preaching to chickens, and later in Brown Chapel AME Church in Selma. In 1965, Lewis led marches in Selma across the Edmund Pettus Bridge on the way to Montgomery to protest for voting rights for African Americans. That event was later known as Bloody Sunday, as state troopers beat marchers back when they reached the other side. On Sunday, the congressman's body will be carried over the bridge for a final journey to Montgomery. For NPR News, I'm Kyle Gassett in Troy, Alabama.
Anyone arriving in Washington, D.C. from a coronavirus hotspot for non-essential reasons will be required to self-quarantine for 14 days under new orders from Mayor Muriel Bowser. It excludes neighboring Maryland and Virginia. Progress in Texas, where officials say the number of new cases has been falling for several days. A team of 20 medical specialists from New York have been working in Houston to help with testing. Mayor Sylvester Turner thanked New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for reaching out.
He graciously offered to send support to the city of Houston to assist in our testing, recognizing that we're in the midst of a resurgence.
Different picture in Florida, which confirmed more than 12,000 new cases of the virus today. That puts the overall number at over 400,000 in Florida. The Dow has closed down 182 points, or more than 0.5%. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from Heather Stir Haga and Paul G. Haga, supporting African Wildlife Foundation, working to ensure the future of Africa's wildlife and wildlands. Learn more at awf.org. And Americans for the Arts at americansforthearts.org.
This is WAMU Regional News. Good afternoon, I'm Jonathan Wilson. 86 degrees right now in Washington. It's 4:04. People traveling into D.C. will now be required to self-quarantine, according to a new order from Mayor Bowser today. D.C.ist Colleen Grablick has more.
Starting Monday, non-essential travelers are required to self-quarantine for 14 days if they're coming from what the city is calling high-risk areas. These are locations where the 7-day moving average of daily new cases is 10 or more per 100,000 people. Here's Mayor Muriel Bowser.
We know that there are places where people are not being as cautious or making the sacrifices that we're making here in D.C.
Maryland and Virginia are excluded from the list. The mandate will last through October 9th, which is the expected end of the city's public health emergency. College students arriving in the fall will be required to follow the new regulation. The list of high-risk areas will be posted on the city's coronavirus website and updated every 2 weeks. For WAMU, I'm Colleen Grablick.
The Arlington County Board has voted to join a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration over plans to exclude unauthorized immigrants from this year's census. The board voted 5-0 on Thursday to join the suit, saying it was unconstitutional for President Trump to exclude unauthorized immigrants. The county said excluding certain residents from the census would jeopardize some of the $50 million in federal funding it receives based on census data. The Constitution empowers Congress, not the president, with the final authority over the census. However, Trump has ordered information to be produced that would allow him to exclude unauthorized immigrants. In the forecast tonight, scattered showers and thunderstorms before 8 p.m. and then a chance of some more showers after that. We could get some fog after midnight. Mostly cloudy skies, a low around 73 degrees. Saturday, a slight chance of showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon. Otherwise, it'll be partly sunny, a high near 90 degrees. That's WAMU 88.5 News. For more news, go to WAMU.org.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. The pandemic safety net is only catching so many people. And today, 2 giant holes have been ripped in that net.
An extra $600 a week of federal unemployment money evaporates today for almost everyone who's been receiving it.
And a federal moratorium on evictions that has protected nearly 12 million people also expires today, which means a wave of evictions may be on the way.
Barbara lives in a fourplex in New Orleans with her 7-month-old baby. We are using her first name only because she fears retaliation for speaking out about her situation.
We rent here and we're currently facing eviction, and I don't really have any family. You know, everybody's struggling now just to try and survive. And it's hard out there. Nobody's working. People are desperate, you know. I don't have a backup plan.
Barbara was working under the table, managing a bar when the pandemic hit, and when she lost her job, it was unclear whether she'd be eligible for jobless benefits. She hasn't received any so far, and so she can't pay the rent.
About 30% of rental units have been covered by the federal eviction moratorium. If a landlord has a mortgage backed by the federal government or receives any sort of federal rental assistance, those landlords have been barred from evicting their tenants under the CARES Act until today. And Barbara is out of options. Her landlord has given her a choice.
My daughter and I will be living in a shelter more than likely. It's pretty desperate, you know. It's hard to try and form a plan when you don't have any options, if you don't have a support system. It's very easy to fall between the cracks. And I just want to do what's best for my daughter. Give her a decent life, you know, keep a roof over her head, and food in her stomach, to give her a good life. I don't know how I'm going to do that if we lose our house.
Well, millions of renters were not covered by the federal eviction moratorium, but a patchwork of state and local rules banning evictions has helped many. We wanted to bring in NPR's Chris Arnold to explain the overall situation and what Congress is doing right now to help renters. Hey there, Chris.
Hey, Mary Louise.
So you have been looking at this patchwork, as I called it, of protections. How is it working or not working? Who is actually protected from eviction right now?
Well, patchwork is a really good word because a lot depends on where you live. If you look at Boston and Pittsburgh, for example, there's still very strong protections to stop evictions. In a lot of other places, though, you know, there's local moratoriums that have been ending, expiring. And I talked with somebody who's tracking eviction filings in a bunch of cities. Peter Hepburn is a researcher with the Eviction Lab at Princeton University. And he says, look, back in March, the pandemic struck, lots of things shut down, and so did most eviction filings.
But since then, we've seen large rebounds in a number of cities. So in Houston, we saw 600 eviction filings in April. That doubled to 1,200 filings in May, and doubled again to over 2,500 new filings in June. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, eviction filings surpassed historical averages for the month of June. And that's despite the fact that the federal moratorium covers probably a third of renter households.
And that federal moratorium, like you just said, that stops today.
Stops today. Has it worked? Has it been successful? How has it helped people?
You know, it's interesting, but frankly, I was a little skeptical about it at first because a lot of tenants have no idea if their property is covered or not. I mean, is the property backed by a government guaranteed loan? Who knows? And a lot of people don't have a lawyer to help them. But Peter Hepburn, we just heard from with the Eviction Lab, says, no, you know, actually this has been working, and landlords, for the most part, have been complying.
So we're very worried about it ending. The end of that moratorium could signal sort of the cliff. This could lead to a large spike in new eviction filings.
And you know, when people get evicted, it's hard emotionally, but it's also hard to recover financially. This can lead to homelessness. It's harder to get another apartment because when they check with your last landlord, you got evicted. And on top of that, like you said, we've got this double whammy that the moratorium's expiring along with that extra $600 a week in unemployment benefits.
It's a huge double whammy in the same day because that money has been helping people pay their rent and stay in their homes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been huge, right? Rent is most people's biggest bill. A lot of states don't pay very much in state-level unemployment benefits, and so $600 a week is a huge amount of money for somebody without a job. And we've got right now upwards of 25 million Americans on unemployment getting that benefit, and all of those people are losing that today or technically this weekend. A lot of people are really worried about this.
Let's turn this around and look at it from the other end, from the landlord's point of view. If you have a bunch of tenants who aren't going to be able to pay their rent going forward for whatever reason, that's a huge problem for the landlords, many of whom are small business owners. They're trying to make a living too.
Yeah, of course. Landlords, big and small, are very worried. I talked to Paula Sino with the National Multifamily Housing Council. She represents the big apartment building owners.
The worst case scenario is that you have this wave of renters who are just unable to make those housing payments. That directly leads to property owners that can't make their payroll. They can't satisfy their own financial obligations on those properties. That risks a system failure when you have a wave of properties then that are going into default.
She's talking about this cascade of, if apartment buildings start going bust, and that sets off a chain of events that hurts the financial system and the economy. And look, we saw a historic catastrophe not long ago with foreclosures and a lot of people losing their homes. Housing advocates say we could see more people displaced here if Congress doesn't extend some kind of help.
Okay, well, speaking of Congress, what is their role here? We know they're trying to come up with a fifth coronavirus relief bill. Do we know whether extending that $600 in unemployment might be a part of that? Do we know whether additional help for renters might be in there?
That is on the table and being talked about. Democrats want to extend the $600. Republicans say it's too much money. It creates a disincentive to return to work. They're also split on extending the moratorium. Democrats also want a separate rental assistance fund for renters and landlords. But, a lot of stuff is changing and moving in the negotiations, and lawmakers will get back at it next week.
All right, that is NPR's Chris Arnold reporting. Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
NPR is looking at hospitals around the country that are at risk for reaching capacity due to rising coronavirus infections. On Tuesday, we highlighted the situation in Boise, Idaho. Today, we visit Yakima, Washington. Yakima's only hospital got overwhelmed in June and had to send patients hours away for treatment. The community took action and brought hospitalizations down for now. Will Stone reports.
On a busy stretch of road here, a couple hours east of Seattle, a green park is lined with about 8,000 red flags. On each one is a black silhouette. It's a way to represent the toll of coronavirus. Leola Reeves helped set them up.
As you look towards the end, we have the salute to those who did not survive. They're the black flags.
There are about 200 of those. Reeves' stepfather, Bill, was almost one of them. The 70-year-old caught the coronavirus in late spring and spent 2 weeks in the hospital.
My mom got the phone call. What are his final wishes? And that was hard.
Until then, this community of about 250,000 hadn't seen a crush of patients like Seattle. But the virus was picking up speed, sweeping through long-term care facilities, sickening farm workers, and spreading uncontrollably in the community. Reeves knew the healthcare system would be strained.
That was one of my major concerns, of course, when it first happened. Is he going to have to get sent off to Seattle or anything like that? Luckily, that did not happen.
But it might have, had he been hospitalized a few weeks later. By mid-June, Yakima was considered the epicenter of Washington's coronavirus outbreak. Dr. Tanny Davenport is with Virginia Mason Memorial Hospital in Yakima, which has over 200 beds. He says on one day they even had to transfer 17 patients hours away to the other side of the state.
17 is an all-time record. We've never had anything close to that number ever in our history.
Yakima was vulnerable to coronavirus. In January, the city's only other hospital closed.
Our critical care beds went down from 24 to 11. So now you throw COVID on top of it, and that really was a strain.
An NPR analysis shows Yakima has one of the worst ratios of hospital beds to people with coronavirus infections in the country. The hospital doubled its ICU beds and retrofitted entire floors. Davenport says the biggest challenge wasn't only physical space.
We had beds, but what we didn't have was the team members to safely take care of those patients.
It seemed the healthcare system was on the brink, about to be overrun. But so far that hasn't happened, partially because of timing. Coronavirus hit Yakima hardest while other parts of the state had the virus under control. That meant hospitals in Seattle had room to take care of patients.
And that was really our saving grace. If that would have happened with everyone else being overwhelmed, it would have been a much different story.
It wasn't just good fortune, though. The community took action. Around Memorial Day weekend, a survey showed only about 35% of people here were wearing masks. Lillian Bravo is with the Yakima County Health District.
Without a specific metric, without a goal, it was really hard to motivate people, especially in a time when there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of mistrust.
They launched a public awareness campaign, enlisted the support of businesses, and blanketed the community with free masks. 6 weeks later, mask use was at 95%. Cases have come down, the hospital has more room, and Yakima is looking like a success story. But a lot of tests are still coming back positive now. Back at the park, Leola Reeves stands next to the black flags, memorializing those who have died with coronavirus.
We've actually been doing great success in lowering our numbers by wearing masks and by social distancing. We are finally starting to succeed.
She hopes soon they won't have to stand up many more flags. For NPR News, I'm Will Stone in Seattle.